Alrighty, so it is Monday, which means we have box office to discuss. Now, we did have a couple of new releases this past weekend, but none of them were able to dethrone Beetlejuice for its third weekend at number one. It grossed $26 million this past weekend, which is down only 49%, which is an incredible hold for the third weekend. And yeah, this film is kind of a box office juggernaut, at least when it comes to the domestic box office. Overseas, its numbers are a little softer, and we've seen this happen earlier this year with Twisters, where it was a box office hit domestically, a phenomenon, if you will, but it just didn't connect so much overseas. Now with Twisters, that was very Americana centered, and so that makes a little bit more sense. But with Beetlejuice, are people outside of the US just not that into Halloween? Is that what's happening? Or is there some other reason why this film isn't connecting overseas as well? That is something interesting to think about, but it is killing it at the box office, so no need to cry for Beetlejuice. It is doing just fine. Transformers 1 was the biggest release of this last weekend, and it managed to gross $25 million, just this close from Beetlejuice, but it still is at number two. Now, while $25 million for this Transformers 1 isn't a horrible start, it is weaker than was predicted. This movie was predicted to potentially land somewhere in the 30s, which would have been great. Would have been a really solid start to this reimagining prequel of the Transformers series. This is the first animated movie released theatrically in a long time. It's been a live action franchise, but it is on par with other Paramount Animation films, such as the Paw Patrol movie and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which kind of gives you a scope of who their audience is or the size of their audience. But yeah, one shining light is that it is getting great reviews, both critically and from the audiences. People are loving this movie, and so I definitely think that this will help it get legs. However, The Wild Robot is coming out next week, which could eat into its audience and most likely will. The other new release this weekend was Never Let Go, starring Halle Berry, released by Lionsgate, and it opened to 4.5 million, which is not the greatest start. But for Lionsgate, it's pretty on par with their recent kind of releases. We've seen The Killer's Game, we've seen Borderlands, just all of their recent releases aren't connecting. This is just Lionsgate's fourth flop in a row. And next week we have Megalopolis. So will this curse continue? More than likely, that film's not tracking well and it's not getting really good reviews. But there is this kind of wild card that it does have some immersive IMAX experiences, which we are meant to assume it's that scene where someone from the audience talks to Adam Driver on the screen. They're in the audience, or it is assumed that that's what it is, and that could raise interest because it is a very interesting technique. Some might say gimmick, but I think it'll draw people to at least to those screenings, which are a few. But who knows? That could be enough to push the needle to make this not a total failure, which is exciting. And I'll let you know how that is, because I am planning on going to one of those screenings next Saturday. Another release that I am particularly partial to and that I am very excited did pretty well this weekend is The Substance. The Substance is really one of movies' biggest releases, their first big release, and it opened to $3.1 million. Not just that, but it got a B Cinema score, which is amazing for a horror movie. Usually horror movies have to compete a lot harder if they get a high score in the B's, in high B's. That is like a normal movie getting an A+A. So this bodes well for its legs. There's also not a whole lot of horror coming up until we get sort of closer to October, which is going to be really good for this movie. I think it's going to have a lot of legs and should hold over very nicely. And it's also, in addition, people are loving it, which is great for its longevity, not just box office wise, not just awards wise, but in the overall, landscape of film. I think this film is destined to be a classic in the making, and I'm very excited to see where this goes and to see more people connect with it, because I love this movie. I had a very visceral reaction to it, which is something that is unusual. It's very rare, but it's very special when it happens. So I'm glad that more people are going to be able to go see it. Also, very strange that Dennis Quaid is in two movies that are in the top 10. One where he plays this like embodiment of evil capitalism, misogyny, and then he's also in The Substance, which I just mentioned, which is really interesting, just double billing for him. But good for him. The K-pop hive, it is strong, it is booming, and it is racking up the box office. Young Cook's "I Am Still," which is a documentary, kind of see a little bit behind the lens, behind the scenes. Really exciting stuff. But clearly, there is an audience for it. They had very limited show times, and it was still able to crack itself into the top 10, which is really impressive. It just shows you the star power behind Jung Kook. So yes, that was this past weekend's box office. Coming up, we have The Wild Robot and Megalopolis releasing this next weekend, and we'll see if either of them will be able to gather enough of an audience to finally dethrone Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, but it will be a close one to watch.